This video is sponsored by AG1. Use the link in the description to receive a free 1-year supply of AG vitamin D3 and K2 and 5 travel packs with your first purchase. What do you know with absolute certainty? Anything? Are you sure this is real right now? Are you sure you exist in the form you think you exist? Could everything be an illusion? Could this all be a dream? Could your brain be in some sort of vat of nutrient solution for reasons you don't know or remember? All of your current perceptions and memories merely a product of electrical impulses stimulated by a machine. Regarded by many as the father of modern philosophy, 17th century French philosopher René Descartes placed these seemingly absurd questions at the center of his life's mission. In an effort to find the very foundation of all knowledge and discover only what could be known with absolute certainty, Descartes set out to question everything. In doing so, in doubting everything he believed, perceived, and experienced, however obvious or absurd it may have seemed, he would go on to make one of the most notable philosophical discoveries ever made in history. Arguably, it is the only philosophical proposition that is and will forever remain absolutely, indubitably true. It is cogito, ergo sum, or I think, therefore I am. Descartes was born in La Haye, France in 1596, which would later become Descartes, France, after it was renamed after him. At only 1 year old, René's mother passed, leaving him to his father, who was a hyper-busy lawyer and magistrate who had very little time to raise René and his siblings. As a result, Descartes was raised primarily by his grandmother and great-uncle. In 1607, after delaying his education due to poor health throughout his childhood, he entered the Jesuit college at La Flèche. Here, he would become exposed to mathematics, science, and philosophy for the first time, finding out how little he truly knew about the world and developing a strong affinity toward mathematics as the only truly stable method of discovering what he could know. Following Jesuit college, however, under the pressure of his father, Descartes would go on to study and obtain a law degree from the University of Poitiers. Eventually, pushing back against the pressure to become a lawyer, Descartes would instead enter the military with the hopes of becoming an officer. While in the army, he formally studied military engineering, which would re-engage him in mathematics and science. In 1619, everything would dramatically change for Descartes after having a series of 3 intense vivid dreams in a single night. The dreams were so disturbing and moving for Descartes, they essentially caused him to redefine his entire life's path. Through his interpretation of these dreams, he now believed his life's purpose was to reform all knowledge by pursuing a new approach to philosophy. An approach that used the same method found in science and mathematics, that is, rationality. And that's what he did. Unlike many philosophers around this time who still justified their arguments with religious belief, Descartes would go on to argue for a new philosophical system in which propositions needed to be based on logic alone. With this, he would become the first thinker of the philosophical movement known as rationalism, which would go on to also include other seminal thinkers like Baruch Spinoza and Gottfried Leibniz. Essentially, rationalists believe that there are truths that exist prior to any experience or observation, known as a priori knowledge, which can be acquired and understood solely through rational thinking. This directly opposes another philosophical school that emerged around the same time, known as empiricism, which argues that all knowledge comes chiefly from our experiences of the external world, known as a posteriori knowledge. Partly as a consequence of the preceding Renaissance era, skepticism was also becoming an increasingly popular attitude held toward knowledge around this time. Unlike rationalists or empiricists, true skeptics believe that our senses, memories, and reason are all inherently flawed and no certain knowledge can ever be acquired. Descartes, however, being a rationalist, though he agreed that many beliefs were susceptible to irrational thinking and faulty sensory input, he believed truths could be arrived at through reason. And so, he sought to refute skepticism through rationalism. In order to do this, however, he realized he needed to rigorously inspect every single one of his beliefs. He needed to doubt all things completely, assume everything was false, and only take seriously that which could not be doubted. In his seminal work, Meditations on First Philosophy, published in 1641, Descartes wrote, "Some years ago I was struck by the large number of falsehoods that I had accepted as true in my childhood, and by the highly doubtful nature of the whole edifice that I had subsequently based on them. I realized that it was necessary, once in the course of my life, to demolish everything completely and start again right from the foundations if I wanted to establish anything at all in the sciences that was stable and likely to last. Famously, Descartes used an analogy of an apple basket to illustrate his process of thinking. He suggested we imagine a basket of apples in which some of the apples may be rotten. If in fact any of the apples are rotten, the rot will spread to the other fresh apples and ruin the entire basket. And so, the only way to prevent this from happening is to take every apple out of the basket, inspect each one individually for rot, and then only place back the fresh, good apples. The point here is that any rotten or false beliefs can and likely will affect one's other beliefs, destroying the entire structure through which one understands the world. And so, one must doubt or take out every single one of their beliefs, breaking each one down into smaller questions to further evaluate them for logical problems, and then only accept and place back the things that are impossible to doubt. This extreme form of skepticism would come to be known as Cartesian skepticism or Cartesian doubt. It might sound counterintuitive that Descartes would employ such an extreme form of skepticism if he was a sort of anti-skeptic, but this method is known as methodological skepticism, in which skepticism is used as a means to disprove skepticism by reducing it to absurdity in the form of truths that cannot be doubted. Doubt is the origin of wisdom, Descartes wrote. In the first meditation in Meditations on First Philosophy, which is broken up into 6 meditations, Descartes contemplates the very foundation of knowledge. Since for him, anything that was possible to doubt at all, to any degree, was to be left out and treated as false, he soon found himself asking these fundamental questions. How could he know anything was as it seemed? How could he know anything existed? How could he know that the world was not some deception? Everything from the colors he saw, to the memories and beliefs he had, to the very existence of himself. Perhaps it was all a dream. After all, for the most part, one only ever knows that they're dreaming after they've awakened. Or perhaps he was awake, but his mind was being manipulated by some sort of evil demon. At the beginning of the second meditation, Descartes writes, "So serious are the doubts into which I have been thrown as a result of yesterday's meditation, that I can neither put them out of my mind nor see any way of resolving them. It feels as if I have fallen unexpectedly into a deep whirlpool which tumbles me around so that I can neither stand on the bottom nor swim up to the top. Nevertheless, I will make an effort and once more attempt the same path which I started on yesterday. Anything which admits of the slightest doubt I will set aside just as if I had found it to be wholly false. And I will proceed in this way until I recognize that there is no certainty. Archimedes used to demand just one firm and immovable point in order to shift the entire earth. So I too can hope for great things if I manage to find just one thing, however slight, that is certain and unshakable." Eventually, after intense doubting and contemplation, Descartes would arrive at this certain and unshakable discovery: solid ground to stand on at the bottom of the whirlpool. He realized that if he was dreaming, if there was an evil demon affecting his thoughts and perceptions, if he couldn't trust any of his experiences, memories, perceptions, or beliefs, he could still know one thing: he existed. If perceptions and thoughts were occurring at all, then there must be a mind in which those thoughts and perceptions were occurring. One cannot doubt if they exist, if they do not. Thinking is proof of being. I think, therefore I am. Descartes writes, "If there is some deceiver or other who is supremely powerful and supremely sly, and who is always deliberately deceiving me, then too there is no doubt that I exist if he is deceiving me. And let him do his best at deception, he will never bring it about that I am nothing, so long as I shall think that I am something. Thus, after everything has been most carefully weighed, it must finally be established that this pronouncement, I am, I exist, is necessarily true every time I utter it or conceive it in my mind." With this truth as a foundation, Descartes believed he could now go on to attempt to prove other truths, in particular, the existence of God and mind-body dualism. He would argue that since innately he could not doubt that his mind existed, but he could doubt that his body existed, then his mind and body must be separate and therefore made of two different substances: extended substances, or physical, and thinking substances, or mental. His argument for God would essentially rely on his ability to conceive of the idea of God. since he could conceive of a perfect being within his mind, and according to Descartes, all things that exist must have a sufficient cause for their existence, which in this case must be something more perfect than the idea of a perfect being. Then, for Descartes, God exists. Of course, there are a lot of problems here. Even if the mind and body are separate, that does not mean they are made of different substances. They could still be made of the same basic physical material, of the same physical world, subject to the same physical laws. And the inability to doubt or conceive of something does not necessitate its existence, nor define its quality, nor predicate perfection. All is to say, although Descartes did seemingly find the bottom of the whirlpool, his attempts to swim back up and find the surface only led him to being swirled back around and placed back down on the ground. And arguably, that is where we have and possibly will always remain. Descartes described the cogito, I think therefore I am, as the first item of knowledge. Perhaps, however, it is the only item of knowledge. But without any doubt, Descartes should be revered for it, for his groundbreaking work, discoveries, and contributions. He forever influenced Western philosophy, mathematics, and thinking as a whole, from the way we question things to the way we strive for their answers. Through his process of extreme skepticism, he dived headfirst into the whirlpool of uncertainty and emerged with one of the most notable philosophical propositions ever uttered. Perhaps the only thing that while you're swirling around this whirlpool, you can always hold on to. And in seeming perfect poetry, that thing is you. Without doubt, without question, you are the solitary absolute truth amidst a sea of all things uncertain. This video was sponsored by AG1. Regardless of whether life is some sort of dream or illusion, it appears that no matter what the case, our mind and our body are in a deep, interconnected relationship. And although each of our bodies have a degree of individuality, they all seem to rely on the same foundational nutrition. Getting proper nutrition, however, isn't always easy, and as someone who often wants to maximize their time in life, nutrition can easily fall to the wayside. AG1, however, makes getting foundational nutrition and supporting whole body health easy, effortless, and consistent, with just 1 scoop in 8 ounces of water every day. Through a science-driven formulation of micronutrients, phytonutrients, and essential symbiotics, AG1 supports the whole body, including the gut and immune system, which in turn supports a well-functioning and well-focused mind. Ultimately, our body is a vessel that treats us how we treat it, and AG1's easily absorbed ingredients show it that we care. By supporting digestion, immunity, and gut health with its prebiotics, probiotics, and plant-based enzymes, our body returns the favor to us in the form of improved mental clarity, energy, and mood. Whether you're a creative, an athlete, or someone simply looking for the best option to get your daily nutrients, AG1 is the perfect cornerstone of your health journey because not only does it combine many health products into one, but it is also the perfect, easy way to show your body, your mind, and yourself that you're engaged, ready, and care about doing things right every day. Go to drinkag1.com/pursuitofwonder to get started on your order. By using my link, you'll also receive a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D3 and K2, plus 5 travel packs with your first purchase. And of course, as always, thank you so much for watching in general, and see you next video.